report a breaking news story. The body of Emmett Lewis Till has been found dead.
One of the first things I was really struck by when learning more about who Mamie was how incredibly intentional she was, of how she was being perceived and received, and being able to use that in a way that would help to create some sort of change. Most of us would not know who Emmett Till was if it weren't for Mamie.
We get to see how Mamie fights for justice. We get to see how she changes. Her coming to understand that Black people are all connected, that all people are deeply connected. If something is happening to one of us, it is happening to all of us.
There were a few times, most notably Mamie's testimony. I was speechless. She's brilliant.
There will be no pictures taken during court proceedings.
It's been an effort trying to get the story of Emmett Till on the big screen. Being able to work side by side with my producing partners, Fred Zolo, Barbara Broccoli, Whoopi Goldberg, Thomas Levine, and Michael Riley, it's been truly, truly a blessing.
We tried to get it set up somewhere, and we got a lot of no's. But we kept at it.
I was also able to work with Mother Mobley for 8 years until she unfortunately passed away. It was her encouragement that pushed me to tell this story.
She did this, I think, for 40-some-odd years. Fought and fought to get justice for Emmett. I've been waiting 10.5 years getting it produced. Keith Beauchamp has been waiting 28 years. He's the reason we were able to get the case reopened.
I think it's very important that we put Emmett's story in its proper context and history to understand how his story became the catalyst that sparked the American Civil Rights Movement.
The murder of Emmett Till was considered the trial of the century. That you could read the journalistic sources of the time, so there's no shortage of books, no shortage of documentary evidence. Mamie Till Mobley, she was a very public figure, so we didn't have to do much guesswork about the way in which she represented Emmett's memory, her pain, and what she wanted.
Mrs. Bradley, I'd like you to meet Ruby Hurley.
It's truly an honor to meet you, Mrs. Bradley.
Thank you.
Mamie was educated, but also her mother was a tailor. So she had a knack for fashion, I feel. This is a rendering of what Mamie Till wore at trial. And this is historic. So this was a matter of reading my own rendering, picking out this fabric to create her top. And then we have the starburst pleated skirt that she wears to the trial. There were color palettes that I focused on. In the beginning, Mamie's wearing something very bright. As the time goes on, her color digresses.
Have you spoke with the prosecution team?
Only once before, on the phone. It was brief.
Hopefully this won't take you. Get together later.
Mrs. Smith. Mrs. Bradley.
Mamie.
From the minute she walks into that courtroom, she turns to her right, and the door opens, and 12 white men consisting of the jury come out. And at that point, she already knows the verdict. So it's not a testimony of changing hearts and minds, but it's a testimony of appealing to the humanity in people.
The first thing I noticed when I became a mother was that my hands were busy all the time. Rocking, carrying, swaying, always full. One hand for him and one hand for what he needed. When it came time to place him down so he could make his own way around, I touched every inch of him, every bend. My hand knew him with my eyes closed, just like I'd know his laughter in a crowded room. It's the same thing when you know all of someone.
Danielle was made for this role. I needed an actor who can hold a frame. I needed an actor who is able to have screen presence and a magnetism that makes audiences hooked and captivated and want to watch you for 2 hours. I needed an actor who can communicate the complexity and the layers that this character embodies.
A mother knows. Your mother would know. And I knew this was my boy, Emmett Till, beyond any doubt.
With the way Danielle Deadwyler acted, like the courtroom scene with this incredible array of emotions, starting from very subtle things, right, that you only see in the corner of her mouth sometimes. We decided not to even try to touch it with score. In terms of the score, I was asked to only score the internal emotions and the transformations and this layer without kind of touching the external worlds.
Mamie's story, you see the transformation once she realized this is like bigger than, like it can't, you know, this is something else now that I have to stand up for.
You've been quoted in the colored press. I told him several times before he left Mississippi that he should kneel in the street and beg for forgiveness should he ever insult a white person.
Not those exact words.
Did you caution him not to insult white women?
I referred to white people in general.
Did you caution your son how to conduct himself and behave himself while he was down here in Mississippi?
Several times.
Several times. Do tell us how.
I will give you a literal description of what I told him. How coming down here, he would have to adapt himself to a different way of life. Be very careful about how he spoke and to whom he spoke, and to always remember to say yes, sir, and no, ma'am. I told him that if ever an incident should arise where there would be any trouble of any kind with white people, that if it got to the point where he needed to go down on his knees before them, well, I told him not to hesitate to do so. Like if he bumped into somebody on the street and they might get belligerent or something. Well, I told him to go ahead and humble himself so as not to get into any trouble. But
what?
Well, I raised him with love for 14 years. My sudden warnings about hate weren't going to get through.
I now show you what purports to be a photograph of your son.
This was taken in my home 2 days after Christmas.
Now tell the court and the jury what this is.
This picture is of my son after Mississippi sent him back to Chicago dead.
And in that scene, we shot take one. And of course, again, I'm shaking with sobs. Chinoy does another take. You could hear a pin drop in the courtroom. And then Chinoy calls me over and she was like, am I crazy, but do we need any other shots in this scene? And I was like, I'm mesmerized.
From the first take, I was speechless. And so I had a lot of those moments. I think all the crew, all the cast had those moments after some of Danielle's takes.
Shivers went up and down my spine, and the entire cast and crew gave her a standing ovation. It's the first time in my life I've ever seen that happen.
It's interesting how when you're really in something and the technical just drops away and you're just in the emotionality of something, the idea is that the truth will always be the truth. And no matter how much you try to mar the truth, it's standing right in front of your face. And a mother's heart, that's like the truth. That's not something you make up.
I used to hide from the light.
Working with Shinoya, we were deeply rooted with each other. I love and respect her for how we've been able to pull these roots up and allow this kind of storytelling to blossom. We're navigating a balance, the full spectrum of the experience of Emmett and Mamie. That's how you respect and move through something as weighted and valuable as this experience is in history and as it is in a retelling.
When you can hook audiences through story and through craft, then you got them, and they'll be better able to receive the humanity of this person who looked different from them.
Believe in yourself, 'cause ain't nobody else who can Someone's counting on you. Yeah.